with trying to get your network up.
Okay.
But first, let's talk about who you are.
Okay.
So if you can say your name, your title, what
Yeah.
tribe you're from.
Sure. Okay. So my name is Linnea Jackson, and I'm the general manager with Hoopa Valley Public Utilities. I'm a Hoopa tribal member, and we're located in Northern California.
Nice. And so why did you want to come to this boot camp?
I wanted to come to the boot camp to refine my skill set. So as the administrator, I might not do the everyday tech, the cable management, the installations. I'm more of a high level person that helps out with grants and the facilitation of everything. So I think it's important to understand all the complexities from step one, from A to Z, and learn what that really entails so I can help and better make decisions for my tribe and my staff.
And so what has been your experience? Can you tell me just the history of your network? Because it sounds like you've already started a network and you're trying to expand it.
Correct. Okay. So within the Hoopa Valley Reservation, we do not have any fiber that provides high-speed internet. We're kind of siloed between the North Coast and the fiber optics that are available. So we have to rely on a wireless backhaul, and we lease space on multiple towers. There's a 4-tower system, and luckily with CASA funding, which is California Advanced Services Fund, we just built our first 150-foot tower on Sugar Pine, which is on tribal land. So that's going to help the resiliency because we were attaching our equipment to a 2-way radio tower and it was already at capacity. There was no wind loading. And so it just wasn't sufficient for us to provide a stable service to our community. And that's going to help, but that doesn't solve the issue. There's not available frequencies that we have there. We're not able to get as much bandwidth or throughput as we would like. So the problem still isn't solved, and that really could be remedied through fiber, which is really expensive. Some of the things that we are dealing with is how do you maneuver that? Do you want to partner with a company? Do we want to own it ourselves? But then you run into issues of being able to properly manage that. Do we have the bucket trucks? Do we have, tribal members or staff that know how to splice fiber? And right now the answer is no, but that's the goal. So we would really like to manage and eventually own the fiber within our reservation. So due to COVID, we started a wireless internet service provider division of the utility. So we now have a WISP called Acorn Wireless. And we've started providing wireless services to our tribal members and our community members. But we're running into issues with the equipment, with firmware updates, with having line of sight, having the equipment be able to see through the trees or in little nooks in the mountains. So we're finding areas that people really need the service, but we're not able to provide that with the existing wireless link. So if we can get fiber there, that would solve that issue, which is our long-term goal.
And so what?
Sorry, before you do that, sorry to barge in. Did you check the focus? Because we never did do that.
Is it out of focus?
No, I don't know. That's why I was just wondering, making sure. It looks good, but I just want to make sure that you adjusted it. Because I'm not Linnea.
Right.
All right, that looks good to me.
Okay.
There was interference from my necklace though, and she made me take it off. It was like, I don't know, vibrating or something?
Take it off,
Okay.
Because it's so
It kept hitting?
sensitive.
Okay.
And so if they clack even a little bit,
Yeah.
it's like pop, pop, pop.
Okay, it was clacking.
It was clacking and popping.
All right, and then just chit chat.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't want these clicks to show up in the actual interview.
Of course they won't. Sorry. Why has it been so hard historically, to get fiber onto the reservation?
I think it's historically been hard because I think the telecoms and the people that receive the funding don't want to invest in smaller communities. I don't think they want to invest in tribal communities historically. So I think we've been underserved for decades. We're also in a rural area, so it's harder to build to. But I think that there have been companies that have been given money to expand out on the reservations, and they have yet to fulfill that obligation. So I think that that's probably, it's not a large market base, and there might be 1,000 customers. So what's really important to us to have that resource might not be important to them as a business decision.
And so why is it important for you as a tribe to have your own network maybe and not rely on those bigger companies?
Right. I think it's really important for the tribe to manage our own resources and have that opportunity, because no one is going to provide for our community and care as much as we are, because we're serving our own family members, we're serving our own tribal businesses, we're helping out the educational systems and the departments and entities that have been lacking in that service. So I think we would be the best ones to manage that, but we also need the appropriate resources and funding opportunities to be able to do that.
And so what is your hope when you leave this boot camp and 1 or 2 years down the road? What do you see the impact of your network having on the community?
So with this boot camp, I think it's so important to bring people from all walks of life that have different skill sets. Some are industry experts 20 years in, some are just starting out, kind of like we are. And I think we're stronger if we help each other and pool resources. Everyone here seems to be willing to extend any help they can or advice. And even just to have that network, I think is really important. So in the next 2 years, I would like to see the fiber built within the valley. I would like to see a high-speed internet provider, and I would like to see redundancy with additional tribes and partnerships.
Awesome. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you want to say, just representing your community and your hope for the future, or anything at all that you want to be out there?
First of all, I would like to say I really appreciate the opportunity that all the funders, the Internet Society, all of the groups that helped make this possible. I think it's really important to continue that. So I do appreciate the opportunity to be here and connect with everyone. As far as what I would like to say, I think it's a really critical time for tribal nations, not only getting the 2.5 licenses, but having opportunities for funding to build out themselves. I would offer advice not to be scared to do that. You can achieve that, bring in your own people and your own resources, train from the ground up, utilize networks and connections that you have, and you do have the ability to provide service for your own people. And so I think that's really important.
Awesome.
Okay.
So good.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can start off the same way that we started with Linnea, where you can just kind of say your name, title, tribal affiliation, network.
Okay. Do I look at you?
Look at me.
Okay,
It's a
cool.
conversation.
All right, cool. So my name is Jessica Engle, and I work for the Yurok tribe. I'm the Information Technology Director. And so a lot of times for tribes, the broadband gets incubated under the IT department, just as a means for standing it up. And then when it gains more ability to stand on its own, it will separate into an external entity or under a utility district under the tribe. And so our broadband company is called Yurok Connect. And so under myself, I have the tribal government IT operations, I have the GIS department, I have media and graphic design, the web department, and then this broadband company. And so I come from a background of just IT, and so broadband was just kind of a nuisance in some ways because I didn't know much about it and just was waiting for the day when it can go away. That was the intention, at least for me, because it was kind of garbage, and not a lot I could do about it because there wasn't a whole lot of funding. Prior to the pandemic, our options were USDA. And with USDA, there's a huge match requirement. Where are we ever going to see that ability to come up with the, even a 2% match on a $2 million grant would be more than we could afford. The other option is a loan, which doesn't make any sense in this environment because we're not profitable. So how would we pay back that loan ever? And we're not anywhere near subsidized. We're not at that ability to be subsidized because there's requirements you have to meet as far as uptime, and we're beholden to the upstream provider. The way that the Yurok reservation is organized, it's very large and remote and vast and rural. There's small groupings of populations, but to get from one end of the reservation to the other, it takes about 2 hours to drive one way, and it's one lane highways with no paved roads. There's no communications. It's very dangerous. And in the wintertime, you can't get onto the other side of the reservation. So what we've had, and it started from a 2009 Community Connect grant for $700,000 to build a tower network on the reservation. And they were all pretty short, 20 to 60 feet at most. But since there's no fiber infrastructure anywhere near the reservation, we have to get our internet from an 18-mile over water wireless link. And until yesterday, that to me was just something that, didn't seem so absurd until like practically looking at what you have to do to link two pieces of equipment together. And just in a single room, two pieces, you have to get them exactly lined up perfectly. Now, 18 miles is a long way. And you add over water, there's, we're on the north coast. There's 9 months out of the year it rains. And the Pacific Ocean in the north coast is very choppy, windy. There's fog, all these sorts of things that impede that connection. So our upstream provider, which is Frontier, they were only able to afford to sell us a 400 megabit connection. So that 400 megabits gets sent 18 miles over water. So that doesn't mean we get the full 400 megabits. We maybe get 120. And then that has to feed the entire, 44-mile long reservation across our self-built tower network to serve the customers that we have, that we can get to through point to point. Now, there's still a ton that we can't because trees, terrain, the folks that live along the river, the towers are along the mountains. And to get down into the river and the canyons, it doesn't quite work. So, up until recently, the standard connection for our customers is a 1 megabit connection. And the premium is 5 megabits. So that is for our entire community, and there's no other provider. There's no telephone service. A lot of homes still do not have power service. And the waters that we do have, the water utility is an in-government water utility. So they're constantly having to, be without water when there's a drought. If a water tank has a leak, it has to be repaired before they can get water. And, there isn't a lot of money in water infrastructure, so sometimes they have to boil their water before they can even use it because there isn't the proper infrastructure behind it to keep it clean and healthy. And that's just the way people live in on the reservation. It's crazy. And so, to me, as an IT director, I was more concerned with the government operations and IT structure and my two-man show, one broadband tech on each side of the river, were more of a nuisance than anything because there was nothing I could do to fix it. And so at the onset of the pandemic, there was an opportunity to do something. And with my lack of experience and knowledge, I went to a contractor and I said, contractor, you know our problems. We are paying you a grant to do a feasibility study of what it would take to get our towers cellular ready. Meaning, we got a grant to be able to see what we needed to do to our towers to make it attractive for a cellular provider to co-locate so we could have some sort of cellular. And
Can I pause you 1 second?
mhm.
Check the camera. Okay, you're good, sorry.
Okay. So I asked the contractor, what would it take? You know, you're doing these studies through this grant. What's the number, the bottom line number to fix the problem? Because I don't know what the problem is. I just know that it's not working. What do we need to do? And so this contractor gave me a number, and I went to council and said, this is the number to fix the problem. I need the money. And with the CARES Act, council approved that dollar amount. Now that, you know, the money is gone, and, you know, it's obvious now that that contractor was almost in some ways taking advantage of my ignorance. Because what we paid for and what we got was not a solution, or wasn't a solution in the full picture. And looking at what we got in return for that amount of money is pretty ridiculous. So what we had really needed was a replacement of our backhaul, new equipment to carry that 400 megabit connection all the way through instead of it being a leaking pipe, which we did get in the equipment portion, but that's only maybe like 20% of the full amount of money that we paid. We needed taller towers because the trees grew. Looking at the towers we did get, which we paid for 6 and we got 2. And the 2 that we did get are poorly installed to the point where we almost feel like we need to have an engineer come out and make sure that they're safe to climb. And they're 150-foot towers. We had them powder-coated green to be able to blend in with the scenery more, and the paint's flaking off into the ground, which is an environmental concern, and they've only been there for a few months. And the one tower that was the most expensive of all has some parts and pieces that are not, it's like the ladder for the first section to climb is twisted, like it's not safe to climb. And it's like looking at the aftermath, I realized that in a lot of ways that we were preyed upon for our ignorance and kept in the dark so that we weren't able to know any better. And so that's really motivated me, and like being a part of this. And just in one day I realized I needed a little bit more information so that I could better represent the tribe's needs. So all of that aside, you know, lessons get learned, and I'm glad that it was learned because now I know better. And looking at what we do need, I know what we need. We need access. We need middle mile fiber. And we have an opportunity to get it in the form of, you know, NTIA's $1 billion tribal broadband through the stimulus bill. It's not going to solve all the problems, though. And so there's more infrastructure money coming, which is great. But the first and primary need is access. We need access to the bandwidth. And to get that, I need to build middle mile fiber. And, you know, looking at the terrain, it's all along the Highway 101 in California. There's no cellular service. There's no internet service in any of our reservation area or our ancestral lands. And, when I first worked for the tribe, I was, leaving home from work, and I was in a car accident. A tourist, pulled into Trees of Mystery. There's like a big Paul Bunyan statue and a blue ox, and without looking, they just head on. I was heading north, they were coming south, and they saw the Trees of Mystery, blue Bunyan, and turned right into me, and it broke my hand, and I was pretty messed up, but there's no communications, So waiting to get EMS there or even be able to call to get help took forever. So that was pretty awful, but that's what I want to solve, with this middle mile fiber is going to give the opportunity to bring in communications and be able to have those sorts of things along the freeway. We have a lot of great relationships with the National Parks Department because we're doing condor restoration, and they want to be able to have in their parks buildings live cams of the condor nests, for this, almost extinct bird, and rebuilding that population of Pregoniche, which is the Yurok word for the condor. And it's very culturally significant because the condors are what brings your prayers up to the Creator. And so it's a hugely important for the tribal government. And it's a cool thing to do with the national parks. But there's no way to even get a signal down into the canyons where these birds are going to nest, let alone have a live feed for the world to see of this restoration of this almost extinct animal. And then in addition to that, Stone Lagoon, it's like a little turnoff in a lagoon where a lot of people like to go along the coastal highway. The Parks Department has given that over to our culture department because that's a culturally sensitive site. And so now that parks building is becoming a visitor center that's going to host some, like a gift shop and teach the proper things about the history of that area. One of the reasons why the Parks Department is working so closely with the tribe is because they were promoting a colonial explanation of what happened in that area, and it was wrong. And so correcting that was really important to the parks. And so now that building is occupied by the Yurok Culture Department, and they're sharing what the real history of that site, and have some of the collection of our baskets and culturally sensitive items there too to share. So that particular site, there's often drownings, and it's really popular for people to go kayaking and things in that lagoon, but there's no communications whatsoever. And so that's a hugely important thing too, is like not just on the reservation, but in the ancestral lands. There's so many opportunities to solve this, and the providers, the service providers never will because it's too expensive. It's too expensive. There's not enough cost benefit to them, no matter how many millions of dollars they get in high cost funds or subsidies or anything to do that very thing. But since our motivation is not in profit, it's in providing a service and solving the problem, it's our opportunity to fix it. And it's just, it's what's hugely important for me is in this step is towards sovereignty, is if we're going to be the ones to solve it, then we're going to be the ones to solve it, that we're not just going to pay a provider to finally do it, and let them have, still be beholden to them, to their uptime, to their maintenance, to whether or not they decide to continue to invest in the infrastructure. And it's incredibly evident when you, like one of our little mountains, you drive up the mountain and you see telephone poles with carrying coax cable for a cable company that had come out and done a build to provide cable service on that hill. And they're all dilapidated and falling over because there wasn't enough to maintain their company, so they went out of business. And now it's just these poles that are falling over and these wires that are looping across the roads. and they are long gone. And so that's the risk, that if we were just to hand over all the money to the provider, just like they've been getting for years, there's that risk, and we're not willing to take it. And so we're going to be able to have the opportunity to build our own capacity to maintain it and not be, at their mercy anymore, that we're going to have sovereignty over utility. And this utility is hugely important. And it's access to high-speed internet. It's like our students are suffering, they're without access to just the basic things like internet. They are suffering in the test taking and in the outcomes, in following a child from cradle to grave, essentially. It's very evident that this lack of access has a hugely negative impact on their education and their opportunities. And so, like the Yurok Reservation, the Yurok tribe itself and the reservation is the largest in California in terms of land and population. So we should have an opportunity to have the same access that other people do, and we don't. And the median income on the reservation is $13,000 a year, because there's nothing around. But when you bring fiber, when you bring high-speed internet, that's when development happens and when opportunity happens. And so I'm really looking forward to that, because even though utility is not profitable, I'm making sure that the council and everyone is aware this is going to cost money, and it's probably not going to have a huge return on investment directly. But there are a million different indirect benefits of bringing the access. Economic opportunities, better outcomes for the children, and individuals that are low income because they can't get to a job physically outside of the reservation because it takes too long to get there, transportation is an issue. They can now do an e-commerce store from home and sell some of their wares or art pieces or things like that to sustain their income. And that's really exciting for me.
I'm going to Bigfoot quickly. We only have a minute or two left.
Yeah, no,
Would you please, I'm going to take a couple pictures, and then after that, I'd like you to just tell us again about the Condor and briefly the visitor center and that sort of stuff, and wrap up with why that's important. The way you said it, you were sort of searching for words a couple of times.
Oh, okay.
And I'd really love to have that, because I thought that was really powerful.
Okay.
So just let me get a couple of photos and clicks out of the way.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. I think people are going to be coming down, so just ignore them.
Okay.
Wrap up in a couple minutes.
Okay.
But just, I think the question is just sort of tell us about how condors play into the need for broadband.
Okay. And so for the Yurok tribe, we are restoring the California condor from extinction and bringing them back onto the reservation, and through a partnership with the National Parks Department. And so we want to be able to have live nest cams so that the Parks Department can show the community and the world what is happening to bring back the California condors. And so it's hugely important to be able to have access to be able to get into those canyons and view those nests, and so the world can see these condors coming to life and bringing them back. And for the Yurok tribe, Pregonish, that's the word for condor, is they carry the Yurok's prayers up to the Creator. And so it's not just a wildlife endeavor and a collaboration with national parks, but it's also a hugely culturally sensitive and significant thing to do. And then along with the collaboration of national parks, the cultural department has recovered the Stone Lagoon Visitor Center. The Parks Department works really closely with the tribe and realized that they were promoting a narrative about the history of that particular site that was a colonial viewpoint versus the truth and what was really happened at that site. And so the culture department has taken over the visitor center there, and they allow the community to come in and see the real story and learn about the history of the Yurok people in that particular site. And what else? Thanks. Yeah, we do a lot of cool stuff.
I don't like to ignore you, but like when you're doing an interview with someone, like I just refuse to make eye contact because like,
Yeah.
you make eye contact with me, so
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
gonna
true.
do anything.
Yeah, they're all coming down now, so I'm done.
Yeah, we can